The name of this session is First Screenings, New Directions in ITV, and we're actually going to talk about ITV in detail. We're going to get a little into the weeds as well. We've got some demos, some videos to show as well. My name is Randy Giusto. I am Senior Vice President of Innovation Research at Ipsos Vantis, and there I get to actually work with brands and do a lot of really early stage ideation, concept testing, benefit statement testing, marketing message testing, and I work in the technology practice. So from a day-to-day basis, I'm working on anything that technology touches. So it could be a refrigerator, a washer, a dryer with an LCD panel, to right now the 2012 or the 2013 actually. Smart TV designs, for example, we're testing things of that nature. Lots of smartphone work, lots of things with screens in it, but also a lot of services on the services side. So a lot in the multimedia space, a lot in quad play and triple play, whether it's a cable provider, a satellite provider, or an IPTV provider. So, and before that, I used to be at IDC for many, many years, about 14 years, I believe, and I used to run the digital media and social media research practice, as well as the mobile and wireless practice, and the PC and the consumer electronics practice. And so I've kind of grew up researching a lot of these technologies, and I spent a lot of time with the technology brands and the media brands. And I'm also just a new resident of the Bay Area. I just moved here from Boston over the summer, and you know, I'm a Comcast subscriber, and I've seen the ad platforms roll out to me, and I also have kids that I sometimes want to block some of the ads that come in and some of the things that Shelly was talking about earlier. On our panel today, we have several folks that are going to show what they're doing currently in the space from a platform perspective, from an applications perspective. We have Andy Addis. Andy is Senior Vice President of Business Development at Ensequence, and he's going to go into some of the things that they're doing to enable some of this activity. We also have Ryan Stranahan. Ryan is manager for North America for Visiware. Again, going to focus a little bit on application and building some of the architectures for apps to be actually rolled out to market and onto these platforms. Shelly Palmer, who you all know, who did the last session. Ellen Dudar is Chief Product Officer and co-founder of FourthWall Media. And Ellen's going to go into some of the solutions that they've been kind of rolling out as well. Just to top this off, I'm going to have a seat. We're going to open up the panel discussion. I'm going to have a couple topics, but I do want to open up the floor. But we do have one video that we do want to roll. So if you guys in the back could roll a video to start us off, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, great. So there was an example of an interactive app running on iPad. Ryan, that was yours. And so you want to go into a little bit about what you do and also what you've experienced with that platform and some of the as you mentioned to me earlier, you're focused on really building the app platforms for people to actually construct apps to make the whole television experience more interactive.
Yeah, so what we've seen as an app company is that, you know, we traditionally have done interactive games, and they've been around for 10, 12 years. It's hard to impress people with that type of stuff anymore. So what the all-important statistic that we've all seen is that at least 50%, if not a lot higher, of television viewers are using a second screen, whether it's a phone, a tablet, or a PC, that everyone's engaging with something else. So as an advertising standpoint, how do you further engage your user so that you're not driving them away from your brand? The idea was, okay, you've got this TV show that you're obviously interested in, or you wouldn't have it on. How do you add value to that from the producer standpoint, and then also from an advertising standpoint? So what you do is you build an app. They already have the screen in their hand. The guy on TV says, hey, why not play along while you're watching? Then you can go on and you can further engage that brand instead of having them drive away to another source, whether it's the internet or a game or something along those lines. So the idea was, how do you build a compelling content and a compelling experience and also give advertisers the opportunity to engage them? Because you can't tune away from an app. You can't DVR it. You're basically there. So while a commercial may be appearing on TV, you can also have, you know, an opportunity when they divert their eyes from their TV to still engage with the brand. So the idea was, you know, how do we build a platform where you can, participate with the game live, but also have social aspect to it, and then have voting and polling, and really create a compelling opportunity. And then also, from a broadcaster standpoint, you can then drive those statistics back. So you can say, hey, you know what? Colorado's doing better than LA, or vice versa, or we're seeing a lot of results come in that, people really missed this question. And as the host, you can actually relay that information live to the broadcast, or just simply display it on screen. So it's all real time. It's very fast, and it's definitely a way for users to stay engaged with what they're watching on TV on that second screen.
Okay. And I know you've rolled this out in Brazil, for example, and you've got some good trials going on in Brazil right now. Can you talk about some of the experiences there?
Yeah, so it just launched in Brazil this season with Endemol's Money Drop show, and we've also launched in, I think it's 8 other countries. We've produced close to 400 shows in the first 9 months of the application being launched. And to be honest, we rolled it out very slowly. We just wanted to make sure everything worked before, and actually it wasn't us, it was more the producers. They wanted to make sure everything worked before we went large scale with it, iPhone version, Droid version, iPad version. Now that we're seeing the results come back, and the game usages that we're seeing, and this is all just with Endemol's Money Drop, so it's all just been with one show so far. We've seen gameplays online that are in the 8-digit figures, so people are using it extensively. And the value for the producers is that they can get access to their users' information. So a lot of times what we do to sign up to play on this online version is we'll have them enter an email address or a phone number or something along those lines. Pretty innocuous, but that is very valuable to producers to have that information on their users. And again, what they do with it is not up to us, but
right.
They're obviously acting responsibly with it.
Yep. Okay. Ellen, down there on the end, can you talk a little bit about FourthWall Media? And I know you have some things to show us as well.
Sure, I'll come up.
If you can cue it here. Or...
Okay, so for FourthWall, we create a bunch of different services to help advance the cause on TV. I was asked to show you some of the more recent things that we've been doing. One of them is addressable versioning for ad widgets. And ad widgets are a lot of the overlays that you have seen, out in the news. The Canoe has been doing RFIs and whatnot. What we've been doing is creating a new version of template that allows you to have a single app bound to a 30-second spot and have different variations with targeting information embedded in that app. And then when the app gets down to the box, the app queries the MAC address on the box and then presents the appropriate messaging. In this case, we have a Volkswagen spot where we have one message that's directed to owners, one for lessees, one for a competitive auto, and then others that is kind of a default one. And these all act separately, but it's the same single app that got delivered. So that's a big deal in terms of finally being able to get to the targeting that we need. On the previous panel, we were talking about, what does it take to make all this stuff happen? And a couple of years ago, I think the answer to that was a ubiquitous platform and the necessary infrastructure. And so we really have rolled up our sleeves and have been working on getting that platform rolled out. Now the next step is, okay, let's start launching the apps. But invariably, it comes back to, okay, now what's standing in the way? Whether it's what's standing in the way of TV everywhere or what's standing in the way of advanced advertising, and that's data. That you have to be able to measure the responses that you're collecting from these ads. How well did I get it out there? Which ones were effective? Did people click or did they really care? I totally agreed with Shelly's comments earlier about, I may be the target, but I'm not buying your product. So how are you going to, weed through that data and make it work for each advertiser? And I think it's different for each one. So what we've been focusing on is the capabilities to deliver the variations of the messages here, as well as audience measurement data that's census level data across the board, based on the fact that we've got the EVIF footprint out there. And then lastly, I think, especially in such a disruptive environment, we've been working on connecting the platform out to third-party devices. Let me see if we've got a better picture here, for tablets and phones and whatnot. You know, it really is all about the changing behaviors, and you shouldn't try to change the way people want to interact with media, but what you should do is be able to understand what it is and be able to provide them what they want in the best way possible. So this is a gateway that we've created, that we've connected to the eBiff footprint. And now you can start to envision new games. And so when we were looking at the fantasy sports application on a tablet, there can be additional things that you can do to pop up messages onto the TV screen or a remote control, as we've all seen with the Xfinity apps and that type of deal. But ultimately, it's the connective tissue and the infrastructure that enables a new way, and ultimately new third-party developers to come up with brand new ideas of how do I want to do this, and not leave the TV footprint behind. So, you know, between messaging the right things, enabling the footprint, and then connecting it out so that you have the tools available to make a coherent experience, that's what we're focusing on.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Andy, you want to talk a little bit about Ensequence and some of the steps that your company's taken as far as building some platforms and kind of addressing this space as well?
Yeah,
I know you
sure.
have some things to show us too.
Yeah, so I may do it up at the
Okay.
podium, if that's okay. You guys in the back. Okay, so I'm with Ensequence, and we've been in the interactive TV space for about a decade, a little more than that. And, you know, essentially, you know, this is sort of a vision statement for ITV. It's been around for a long time. We're big believers in it. We have been historically. We continue to be. The issue fundamentally, though, and the reason that we're still talking about ITV 12 years later without real scale deployment, is that historically there have been a lot of impediments. And at the end of the day, creating, managing, and deploying ITV is just really hard, and because it's really hard, it gets pretty expensive. So, you know, given the difficulty and expense, it's lacked scale. Given a lack of scale, there's been a lack of money generated. Given the lack of money, it falls pretty far down on the list of priorities of programmers and advertisers and service providers. So what our focus has been really, primarily over the last 4 to 5 years, is how to develop a platform that takes care of that and addresses all of those core impediments. So essentially, you know, what we bring to the market and what our focus is what we call our ITV Manager platform, that's designed to help programmers and operators create, deploy, and scale interactive programming and advertising content on both traditional platforms, cable, satellite, and telco, as well as emerging platforms, iOS, Android, connected TVs, et cetera. So, and we do that with a life cycle and workflow management system that gives and affords a lot of creative flexibility at very efficient costs. And the combination of those two things enables scale, which is fundamentally what ITV requires for it to be a business. Our platform, again, we call it ITV Manager. We've got several editions. We've got a service provider edition that is really about enabling an operator, specifically a cable company, to embed interactivity in the local advertising that they sell. So we're currently working with Comcast, Time Warner, and Cablevision. Time Warner's been deployed for well over a year. Comcast is on the cusp of deploying our platform. They've been doing it for a while, but they've moved to our platform because it affords a lot more flexibility and a lot more scalability. And Cablevision is a little bit behind them, but you know, they're coming forward pretty quick. We also work with Canoe Ventures to do the same thing to make national ad inventory interactive, and again, applying our workflow and lifecycle management system to facilitate the scaling of diversioned ads that play out, that change again and again and again, and across many, many networks ultimately. And then last but not least, we have a programmer edition that's fundamentally kind of looks at the world through a programmer's eyes and helps programmers develop interactive content and deploy it across the various platforms that they want to be a part of, be it traditional or emerging. So yesterday, our CTO, Aslam Kader, talked about our two-screen initiatives, and we've extended the Programmer Edition platform to accommodate these emerging platforms. We've partnered with Civolution and Zytera from an ACR standpoint to, again, sort of to provide a full sort of end-to-end solution for programmers that want to take advantage of those programs or those possibilities. What I wanted to talk about today a little bit is, while we're very focused on and excited about two-screen, we also have been steadfastly focused on what does it take to make one screen happen. I think that there's, our perspective is that one and two screen interactivity is actually very complementary, and there are pros and cons of each, but when you put the two together, it can be very powerful. So what I wanted to describe a little bit is an approach that we're taking, and we're working with several major operators, and this is, kind of a real thing. It's going to happen. It's going to be in the market probably within 6 months. And let's see. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so basically, from a traditional distribution standpoint, the single screen ITV pain points have been that deployment has been very difficult. There's high costs with an unclear revenue play. So what we're trying to basically address are the fact that there are long development lead times, there's long certification lead times. The cost of creating that content for a programmer is high, and it's a lot of work. And at this current point in time, there's no clear way that can be monetized. So essentially, what we're working through is a pre-built, multi-featured application that has a lot of flexibility to be customized with graphics, branding, and content. It's pre-certified. It's certified once on the operator's platform and can be used countless times by programmers. So, and then there's an end-to-end sort of program to help the programmer manage that on an operator's platform. And at the end of the day, the killer app of TV is TV. And enhancing a viewing experience is best done by the people that produce that content to begin with, and these are the content providers. So effectively, what this platform provides is a mechanism or a tool for them to enhance that programming, on screen in a scalable way, in a very efficient way, in a very cost-effective way, that at the same time brings to bear opportunities to monetize. So. Essentially what we do is we tightly integrate with the content automation and production workflow at a programmer so that producing companion content is not an off the side of the desk thing, but it's fundamental to the way they produce content today. So it's actually very simple, it's very efficient, and very scalable. And it can go to an operator or a cable company's platform, but with a push of a button, it can go to Android, it can go to iOS, it can go to a connected TV. And with scale, once this starts to scale, it does bring to bear other monetization potential, like in-app advertising that's clickable, that could result in an RFI or some kind of response mechanism. So essentially, what I want to do, just very quickly flip you through, I can't replicate a set-top box up here, so I just have a series of screenshots. But this is the same app. It's versioned for 2 different shows, so it looks very different. The features are actually selectable, so the wedding, bridezilla could choose to use 2 features or 4 or some combination, and likewise, you see for MSG. So, there's a prompt, it invokes the application, the consumer has different choices, they can scroll through it, do different things, but it's, Twitter, trivia, poll, guide, but again, it's a very, it's a one-screen experience, and again, pros and cons, but the pro is it's available to 100% of the people looking at a television that's attached to a digital set-top box. There's no equipment required. They're focused on that screen. They're not distracted by Facebook or other things going on that may be in their lap, and you can just see how this thing can translate and be adapted for lots and lots of different shows, which creates the scalability required to monetize ITV and one-screen ITV specifically. So I just wanted to share that with you as one of the things that we're working on, and I'll take a seat.
And that's all overlaid on the linear stream, right? It's not
That's right.
actually taking them away from the actual
That's right.
content as
So
well.
yeah, by one screen, it's all on the primary TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, we'll talk about some things that are going on. I mean, I know in my household just recently, my kids are addicted to the Disney Channel, And in the middle of of the show, it cuts to a commercial, of course, and they start promoting the next the latest Pirates of the Caribbean movie on Blu-ray. And of course, up pops the ad. Do you want to see a trailer for this? Do you want to go out now? And I hit it right away. And of course, the amount of objection I got in my household from my kids. How dare you move away from the Disney, from my program, even in the anticipation that it's coming on any second, because that actually took me away. And I know that was on a Comcast box and it was delivered over eBiff and stuff like that. I know you folks are all working on the eBiff platforms and probably also non-eBiff platforms. What do you see from a limitation perspective on eBiff going forward? And some of the things that, those that, for apps you're producing, for advertisers,
Yeah.
or just what some of the
I'll
limitations
answer.
and what
We're
some of
one
the
of
things are.
the eBiff technology providers out there. We deliver our platform to Time Warner, Charter, a number of smaller operators. And so we're a big advocate for enabling the deployed footprint. There are a lot of things you can do with apps, but the graphics capabilities when you get to the low-end boxes are going to be challenging, and especially when you're talking about certain immersive experiences where there's other, examples of tablets that are so much slicker looking. The expectation is set for that. So there's a lot that you can do to drive engagement and drive responses, get an answer back from somebody, but you're probably not going to build out a big game. There may be types of games that you want to do, but it's not going to compete with an Xbox as an example. However, having said that, I think there's been so much focus on, what does it look like especially when we're talking about advanced advertising. TV and the video itself is all about eliciting some response for that product or service. And if you elicit that response and the viewer is ready to engage, be there to collect the response. Whether that's, yes, I want more, yes, I want to see a longer video, I want to buy it, I want to call you now, whatever that engagement is, I think that eBiff is perfectly suited for that, especially since you can get to the full footprint of homes. So I do believe that it's a bridge as we move to new technologies, but it's a really critical bridge during a disruptive time. And then for us in particular right now, we're focusing a lot on the data and the metrics that you can get across the board so that okay, I've got this existing business. How much is it worth? What am I doing with this? How much do people engage and watch on the existing infrastructure? And how do I make smart decisions going forward? So that's really what I think eBiff's role is. And I think a lot of people look at it and say, we built it for one reason and we're using it for all these other reasons now. And I actually think that that's good. And it's because you have an enabled footprint that you actually can do these additional things with.
Okay. Do you think it's increasing stickiness for the brands? Do you think we've tested it? Do you think it's been deployed enough and that there's enough examples out there that people are starting to see?
There's a lot of
Stickiness
examples in terms of just general single screen apps that if you drive them, people do come, and
Okay.
specifically around sports. We've had sports trackers launched in 9 markets with Time Warner over the years, and people will engage and they want to see their stats, their trackers, their fantasy teams, and you can get high repeat usage. And the apps don't necessarily look as sexy as they possibly could, but they're very catchy and people like them. So there is stickiness there. In the last couple of years with the eBiff technology rollout, a lot of the attention has been placed on the infrastructure and making it more scalable. And so we personally haven't been focused a lot on doing the market launches at the moment. We've been doing a lot of the connective tissue to make it more expandable.
I think it's, we've deployed a lot of interactive apps, not necessarily on cable, in-program stuff on Dish and satellite, or Dish and DirecTV, but there are a lot of examples where if you overlay the content appropriately, and it's contextually linked and relevant to what's on screen right there, there's 5, 6, 7, 8 things that consumers like to do and will engage in, and it's not uncommon to see opt-in rates of 10, 20, even 30% at time, or depending on, again, the way it's implemented, and consumers spending 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 minutes in that interactive mode while they're watching the video. And at the end of the day, and Shelly touched on this earlier, it's about making money. And we talk about engagement, but what does that mean? The one study that we've been involved in that actually I think was pretty well done, it was a test control kind of thing where there was a History Channel application or overlay or interactive experience offered by Dish nowhere else. And they basically measured the Nielsen ratings on the Dish footprint versus everywhere else to look at the delta, and then they normalized it because the Dish ratings are different than everywhere else normally. But when you kind of netted all that out, the ratings in a Dish environment were 18% higher than they were anywhere else. And this is, you know, pretty solid market research done in conjunction with Nielsen that suggests that interactivity well done can increase engagement, that can translate to ratings, which is how people make money.
Well, and I'd like to add to this too. I mean, there's a lot of discussion going on about, you know, the cool things that we can do going forward, but we still have to remember that there's a lot of unsophisticated people still watching TV that don't have high-speed internet, that don't have companion devices, and you can still cater to them. They still have money to spend. They still like advertisers. So you don't necessarily have to blow everybody away by launching a media campaign that has an iPad version, that has a Droid version, that has an on-screen version. You can still do very simple, compelling communications with users and still engage them. So it doesn't, with all the talk of 50, 60, 70% of people watching TV with a companion device, that still means that there's 50, 40, 30% of people. That's a large number when you take the whole cable and satellite subscriber base that still doesn't do those things. And you can still engage them, and there is still value there. So, you know, something like eBiff, while, you know, if somebody's watching TV program and an eBiff ad pops up, you know, those are really cool. It's really neat that you can do that. But if they're also looking at something on their iPad, it's tough to impress them because the stuff you can do on those platforms is so much greater. So
Right.
the idea is you still, but those people that don't have that are just literally watching TV, they can still be engaged and they can still be very impressed by that stuff. So you have to cater to both users. You can't just focus
But
on
what about those households that are on satellite? So there it's a little different paradigm because it's really the DVR that does a lot of that stuff.
You know what? eBiff and all things eBiff look broken. All interactive TVs look broken for years. We've always been the new technology that says we're going to do all this cool stuff. Basically for RFIs or RFPs, requests for more information, RFIs rather, that's where it's shown, the best way, polls. Wink, the earliest technology that didn't use eBiff, that sort of the red button version of the United States and the red button in England, both met with the same fate. And the fate was horrifying. They all started out altruistically saying, I'm going to give you the content you want that's related to the content you're seeing, whether it's an offer or some program enhancement that's absolutely related to what you're watching. The Wink salespeople went in there and they sold this thing to death because everybody wanted it. There's an amazing, as you've just said, I mean, Ryan's got right. Remember, there's connected and not connected households. In a not connected household, something on the screen that pops up that makes you feel like, cool, yeah, press the button, that's awesome. And of course, Wink couldn't possibly sell the number of clicks, deliver the number of clicks they sold. So what did they start doing? They started putting irrelevant content when you press the Wink button. You saw the button, you press it, and it was, instead of it being what you expected related to the sporting event you were watching, you now got a tampon commercial or something. I mean, I'm being extreme, but it was just so not cool that you didn't know. Now, in England, they actually had a different problem. They used the red button, which we all got all excited about. There's a red button, and we're going to press the red button, and it's awesome. Problem is, they didn't let the consumer know what the benefit was. So is it going to cost you money now? Is it going to be free? Is it going to, what's going to happen? And people got scared to press the red button because they just didn't know what was on the other side of the red button. You know, it was like red pill, blue pill, and they weren't sure which pill was which. And to be honest, I'm still not sure whether it's red pill or blue pill, but that's not the point. The point is that that was funny, guys. I'm telling you, this audience, you guys are a tough room. I've been in tough rooms. That's a tough room.
What color is Propitia's bill?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. I wish I did. If I took it, this wouldn't be the issue. So, at least that's what the TV ads say. The point is that what we do now is a disservice to ourselves by trying to make these solutions work for a lot of things that they weren't meant to be solutions for. And what I'd love to see happen is I'd love to see it be the solution for the things it can be a great solution for. The question is, are there case studies where, and there was a Cablevision campaign done a while back, where the Disney theme parks invested pretty sizably in Cablevision's interactive TV platform. And they, being fashion forward as they are, they would run some kind of ad and then it would take you to a VOD experience where you could get virtual tours, and it ended up being an incredibly expensive problem for Disney. They needed to create the content that was at Disney level, whatever that means, and I think we all have our own understanding of what that means. When you pressed the button and something happened. It's like, so getting there was one part of the issue, when the technology to get you there was one part. Then you have to go lean on the advertiser and say, oh, by the way, could you make for me a compelling experience on the other side of this? Because otherwise the viewer is going to be a little depressed about it.
Right.
And this idea that it feels broken and doesn't quite work and doesn't have the capability to, it's not an iPad, it's not Objective-C programming, it's eBIF, right? Well, so I think that's, I hate to say it this way, but it's like, wow, that's a technology for 10 years ago that we tried so hard to get happen in 10 years ago. And just like interactivity on television has been usurped by co-viewing and Facebook and Twitter, the interactive platforms of viewing, eBIF and things eBIF are at a really strange place in their world and in their life cycle, because just as it's getting great, where you guys are starting to get the infrastructure together, I feel like there's a high level of irrelevance, and also I'm not sure how to use it efficaciously to chase after the audience that will think it's cool. It's a big marketing challenge.
I'd love to respond.
I'd love you to respond.
Okay, and I'm so glad Shelly's on the panel to ask these kinds of questions. I really agree, and there's a couple of things that have happened during that time period you just laid out. So when the Wink trials were happening, people didn't have their smartphones in their pockets and go to app stores and download stuff and have a familiarity with the way that they interact with these third-party apps. So for a long time, launching anything within a closed network, everything had to be perfect or else it's not going up. Well, that's not really the way the internet works. A third-party developer, guy in a garage builds something and you throw it out, and if you like it, maybe it had a bug, I don't know, but you live with it. And so it had a model and a framework and an expectation that helped fuel its growth. I think a lot of the expectations for the viewer has changed and matured over this time period, that they're more willing to try some stuff out and go, okay, I kind of like that, this one, forget it, I don't care. Ultimately, the apps have to live on their merit. Am I delivering something that's cool, even if it's low fidelity? When I get an alert on my iPhone, it's a cool iPhone, but it's still a very simple white box with a text message that says somebody called. There's so many things that we go overboard on trying to trick out on the TV that it didn't need to be. What I really wanted was the information. One of the things that was the stickiest thing we've done was eBay alerts on TV, where I've connected my eBay account to my set-top box address, and 3 months later I'm in an auction and I get outbid. That alert will come to TV and tell me, oh, hey, somebody just outbid you. There's some really sticky, simple things that can be done that are relevant. And then in terms of, well, what's it good for? Because this has been a moving target. You can't just say, well, I originally was building it for this, and so I'm going to keep doing that no matter what, even though the whole world has changed during that time frame. What it's really good for is it's enabling a deployed footprint. It's giving us data, census-level data across a whole business that lets us know what is going on with this business so that I can tell, where should I put the content? I've got HD channels that maybe nobody's watching. I'm using bandwidth for that. There's a lot of things that the information about it is what will take the whole space forward. How come people argue so much about being able to go to these new platforms? It's because they don't know if they're destroying their business or not. So being able to have that data. So eBIF is enabling that, census level data. Are panels gone? Well, maybe not. You can still do that. But there's a lot of pressure on the panels of, are they truly representative of the demographics of the country anymore? Are they keeping up with the changes? You know, so there's a lot that's happening over this time period, and you have to have the blinders off and use it for what it's good for right now. And that's, to me, as I was mentioning, one of the operators we're working with says we're doing things with it that we never envisioned. And it's like, you know what? That's because you can, because now it's not a dumb box that's sitting out there. It may be a low-end box that you can't do a lot with, but you can still talk back to it, and it can tell you what it did. And so if I'm sending a commercial to somebody, I know whether they liked it or what they did with it, if they tuned the channel, I know what happened as a result of that. And now I can start piecing together what's my roadmap going forward, which devices make sense. Because there is going to be this sticky footprint that is super hard to shake. You know, for the next 10 years, we're going to have millions of dumb set-top boxes out there still. Yeah. And so ultimately, there's got to be a hybrid solution, and the information to run the business and make the decisions is important to that.
Why did you choose 10 years? I just want to know, why did you choose 10 years? It could be 30 years. I mean,
it could be 30. I chose 10 because it was a number that was thrown out.
Okay.
Comcast actually recently had mentioned this number on another panel, that by 2025 they expected to still have 30 million kind of low-end devices out there.
2,000 boxes still at 2025.
I don't know if it was 2,000 specifically, but the older version, non-IP.
Like QAM-based or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, whatever that is.
So that's a long time to have to deal with this kind of dual hybrid world. And when you're running the business on top of it, having to know where does stuff go, which things make sense. Again, like I'm saying with the HD, I'm carrying channels that nobody's watching. Well, maybe I should do that differently. Maybe those channels really should be streamed. You know, there's a lot of things that I need to understand over this time period.
I also agree with everything Ellen said. I also think that, you know, it is a matter of kind of identifying what it's good at that brings real value to consumers. And, you know, the reality is we don't represent, you know, the rest of the world. The people in this room don't represent the rest of the world. And there's just a lot of people out there that are never going to get an iPad, that are never going to get a smartphone, and they watch a lot of TV. And the reality is consumers today have more to choose from than they ever have. You know, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 choices, I don't know, when you consider all the linear and on-demand choices. And they choose one out of 20,000. And they're really vested in that. And so to make it simple and easy for them to access more about the show they're really vested in, that's contextually linked and relevant, there's value there. So, you know, I do think, you know, that the prospects of two-screen and more powerful devices is very, very exciting, and, you know, the sky's the limit. But I think it's kind of striking the right balance between, you know, what you can do and reach the masses with that can enhance their experience day in, day out, while at the same time leveraging the new capabilities that these new platforms enable, knowing that, you know, at the end of the day, somebody has an iPad in front of them. For them to get more information or get to an enhanced experience for that show, they have to download that app. So they got to do stuff. You can't just, with one-screen interactivity, a little thing pops up, and all you do is pick up your remote that you're already holding, and you hit select. So there's just all kinds of things that will happen and evolve over time. But I think at the end of the day, it's about balancing capabilities with the aim being to drive value for consumers, and ultimately, if you drive value, there will be ways to monetize that, you know, depending on how that value is derived.
Yeah, and just from an app standpoint, I mean, you know, when we're talking about cable and satellite subscribers, you know, 100 million or so in the U.S., that's a big number. And with the one thing that I've heard time and time again yesterday and today is that young kids are not, and I'm looking forward to the panel tomorrow on the young kids, but they're not using these things. So who are the cable and satellite subscribers? They're not family households per se. They're older people. They're not young kids. So who are you trying to impress? Who are you going after? Time and time again, the number one ITV app out there is, does anyone know?
The number one app is it's
most
caller ID on the television through the triple play. It's
Right,
the
but
number one thing in the universe.
The one that people actually select, like caller ID pops up.
Yeah. Oh,
but the one that,
good guide, I guess.
it's weather.
Oh, really? Is that
Yeah,
is an app?
weather is on Dish Network and DirecTV. Time and time again, the most usage is on weather. How hard is that?
Yeah.
To deliver weather information to somebody's set-top box, they can actually go in and do it. They don't have to get out their iPad. And people check weather on their phone. That's what I do. But that is a simple app. You can impress people with that. So all the other cool apps that have rolled out in the last 10 years, you can do great things. You can order a pizza from your TV. It's the classic example. But people check the weather.
When was the last time you actually ordered a pizza from your TV?
When was the last time I ordered a pizza?
Well, I do that relatively frequently.
Maybe you should.
And Seamless Web, which is probably everybody here knows Seamless Web? Who lives in a place where there's Seamless Web? Raise your hand if you've used it. Wow, one person.
Why?
I guess that's not as ubiquitous as we think. In New York, there's a website called Seamless Web. I know they do Los Angeles and a couple other towns. Literally every restaurant is on Seamless Web, and it is the fastest, most remarkable way to order food, especially if you order the same thing from the same restaurant all the time, like some of us do, or with slight variations. I don't think I've ever had an experience that was better crafted, unless you want something that's not on Seamless Web the way you want it, in which case you have to sit there and type it, in which case you find yourself in this funny place. eBIF and the internet and any level of interactivity, when it comes to consumer behavior, you're trying to shorten the distance between the consumer and whatever they want.
That's right.
Right? That's what it is. That's the impact of the technology. Are you better than the phone? Right? And where you are, like where one button press does what the phone ought to be doing, it's killer. And when you're not, people are going to pick up the good old-fashioned landline phone before they pick up the cell phone, which now almost everybody has in their hand. It's truly maybe not everyone in the world is going to have a smartphone, although I disagree with that statement. I think at some point everybody in the connected world will have no choice. But certainly, because that's what they're making, but certainly phone, like feature phone, and however we want to get into the semantics of feature phone versus smartphone, leave that other conversation out. There is almost 100% penetration of phones. And watching TV and phones.
over 100%.
You have a TV, you're very likely to have a phone available to you.
Yeah.
Very likely. So where are the apps? Where are the zones or the silos where the connectivity, where it's better than picking up the phone.
Yeah.
So it's just a better way.
I think that what you're saying is, I believe this myself, is you have to play to the strength of the devices.
Right.
And you want to make sure at the point that somebody's willing to act, that's where you want to be able to have that feature as close as possible. So to me, we've invested so much in the platform, there's no reason not to get the one button push the last mile. But there's a whole lot of other things that you're not going to necessarily, and you shouldn't try to force them in there to fit when it's more cumbersome. Ultimately, we should have all of our devices as valid, pieces of our overall experience. And wherever I see something, I should be able to go, yep, that's it, I want it. And it should be that simple. And so the connectivity, being able to, weave the devices together and work with, integration partners to make that happen, and then not stop the way that people want to work with it. I think that truly is the goal, and not to keep beating the same drum of here's the same app, here's the same app. Now, having said that, there are some really old apps that we have built and delivered to TV, and the perfect example of this is Yellow Pages on TV. It's about the most boring app you can think of a Yellow Pages book on a TV. But we get repeat usage continually because at the point in time somebody's looking for something, they're like, oh, where's my phone book? Oh, I threw it away, or it's on the top shelf, or wherever it is. It's easy for me to go and look for it. So it's spiky usage, but it gets continual repeat usage. I can then say, okay, hey, here's a favorite. I know who your plumber is. I know who your pizza restaurant is. I know all of these things about it. And so there's some things that are surprisingly still resilient and make sense. But there's other things that, you shouldn't convince yourself that it's cool. So play to the strength of the devices.
So Shelly, you mentioned in the last session some of the Intel figures about, how they plan to get to the next billion and the next billion. And I actually just came back last night from Qualcomm's industry analyst event, and there they talked about the Internet of Everything. And there's an acronym for that. It's a big I, small o, big E. And about connected devices and how we are at some point by 2015 going to have a lot of things connected throughout the household, some on low bandwidth, some on high bandwidth. And, tablets were an easy thing kind of to do. to be an augmented device for the TV experience. But the harder thing to do without more bandwidth in the home is to actually synchronize the content that's playing on the television along with the tablet itself. Because right now it's just a companion device. You use it to maybe do a poll while you're watching something, or and you can shift the content onto the tablet, through Comcast or whoever, and go up into the bedroom and watch and stuff like that. But an interesting stat that they kind of threw out there was that data demand in the U.S. In 2010 grew by about 2x, and that by 2013, 2014, they expect data demand within the U.S. household to grow anywhere from 10x to 15x. And so the big question
That's low.
is,
I heard him say 26.
yeah, and the big question is, is the technology going to be there? Is the networking technology going to be there to cover it? And their response was yes, because of 4G, LTE, because of advancements in really low power Wi-Fi that's coming, and home plug and all kinds of other things, that you'll have a mesh network, for lack of a better word, that will push a lot of content and advertising across the multiple screens that you have in your household. And of course, the easy low-hanging fruit to do right now is the social stuff. So, there's a like, I have a like button for me right now, okay? I have a follow me button right now. You can plus me if you want. Do we need another button for interactive TV for social?
I think when you look at the
Yeah.
statistics that those who make statistics like to talk about, you can't, and they're very optimistic, and they're for planning purposes.
Right.
The analysts get hardcore about planning. The regulatory environment is going to have a lot to do with that. The FCC has no control over the wireless world in which we live. You know how bad the deal must have been for us as consumers when the FCC got together with the carriers and the wireless providers and decided to walk away from the table. You know how good that must have been for consumers and how terrible it was for big business. We got screwed that day so hard. I'm talking as people, as citizens, digital citizens of the United States, not as industry people. Between privacy, bandwidth caps, net neutrality, all the regulatory stuff we haven't really spoken about this morning. I don't know if it was covered yesterday or will be covered tomorrow, but we can't look at a technology in a vacuum. And if you took anything from the first panel that we did, I would implore you, while thinking about this, to look at the optimistic data consumption ideas of a Qualcomm or an Intel, which are all self-fulfilling, right, in prophecies. I think the statistic goes something like this: from the beginning of time until 5 years ago, all of humanity created 2 exabytes of data, and now we have the storage capacity at 1.8 yottabytes worldwide, and that is expected to increase at some exponential rate, where we're just creating this massive amount of data and has this massive amount for data storage. Of course, we're going to need to move that data from place to place. We're all in the digital television business now, whether we like it or not. The smaller set-top boxes are analog, and that's why I said connected and not connected. You could argue that a QAM-based analog cable system, which there's still plenty of out in the outside world, where people use CRTs and really can't afford flat screens just yet, to replace every TV in the house, where there's one big flat screen that is it's the TV set of the 50s, right? It's the big 60-inch or 50-inch you got at Walmart for $1,000.
Or the direct projection.
Or whatever. But there's one room like that in a lot of households, and it's all QAM-based. Now overlay that with these remarkable projections of data consumption, data usage, and then try to take that out of context with regulatory. You can't. You just get just tiered pricing alone. Mm-hmm. If you just look at what happened between Netflix and Level 3, that lawsuit, which is the pure definition of net neutrality, if you just were to look at that lawsuit as a sort of instruction manual for what's about to happen, where Netflix is 20% of bandwidth during prime time, or 30%, so I've seen some numbers, and I've also seen where BitTorrent is 20 to 30% of prime time, and porno is the rest of it.
Right.
It's like, that was funny. Are you guys kidding me? That's one of my best lines, and you guys just sitting there like, what? Hello? Anyway, at the end of the day, I thought it's very hard to look at what we're talking about in a sort of vacuum, and say that we can understand it without putting it in the larger context. And the larger context I tried to get to this morning was brands are paying the tow, so profitability would drive commerce, right? If there's some way to make some money at it, we're going to be good. To your point, where we're looking at this exponential increase in the way we're going to interact with bits. So what's the value of a bit in 2020? Right, because the bit, the smallest binary digit, the smallest unit of information we can move from place to place. You just said something awesome. You said that a Yellow Pages bit over eBIF has a lot of value. And the weather bit over eBIF has a lot of value. Maybe more value than an HD channel that has to go over the same band, because I've got a limited pipe, right? So what's the value of that bit? Well, we can have that conversation in the context of our business. The FCC cannot agree what a 911 call is, what a telephone call is, what a television program is, what an on-demand program is, because if they could agree on that, they would regulate television and telephone and tariff it, because that's what governments like to do. So you take all of this and then throw in data caps, and now let's discuss. What's the value of a bit in 2020?
Right.
Well, you can tell it's getting more and more valuable, because I think Sprint is the only company today where when you sign up for a new data plan, you can still get unlimited. There's some articles being written that that's going away soon. Who knows? But I have an iPhone.
One of the last.
Yeah, exactly. I have an unlimited data plan because I was grandfathered in.
Yeah, grandfathered into Verizon.
Exactly.
Soon we'll all be grandfathers.
So that, so there's, they're obviously putting a huge value on it because they're capping it, and they're saying, hey, if you want to be a super user, you're going to pay for it. So the idea then, I guess, from the Wi-Fi networks of the world is, okay, how do we offer them that convenience? So when I get out here and I have an iPhone and I land and it says, you're connected to AT&T Wi-Fi. So I'm no longer using my data plan stuff. There's obviously value in that.
Right.
So there's the Wi-Fi side of it. Everything is being connected, and there's going to only be more and more and more.
So what you said before, but what you said before, I think, is the most compelling argument here, which is that there are plenty of people who are not going to ever have those devices or use them. They're still going to need some level of connectivity. There's still efficiency in eBIF, right? If you use it the right way. But all these things are going to coexist. They don't exist in a vacuum, and they all coexist. These technologies don't replace one another, right? So it puts us in a really strange place because you've got to go fight for the dollars. That's the overarching thesis, right? It puts us in a very 10 years in, it puts us in a strange place because we're fighting for dollars that other technologies are fighting for just as hard or harder.
I think it helps to enable getting across the chasm, because we've had all of these ITV efforts over the years, and we've tried to get it to full deployment, and something would break down, whether it was the model or the ability to get to all homes. There was something that caused the math not to work. And so now we have a bunch of alternative ways. We have external devices that are great and they're out there, but they're still separate from this kind of very sophisticated, mature food chain of content delivery and monetization. And so how do you blend the two? How do you get the best new technology combined with the lucrative business and the mature programming and content world over here? And the only way to do that is to somehow connect it. And so I think, being able to have that infrastructure that does that and make the right decisions as a programmer.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks. I appreciate it. And I want to thank the panelists today as well. I know we kind of were running a little bit late, but if you guys have questions afterwards, please ask. Thank you very much, guys.
All right. See you. Good job.